Course overview script, Principles of Economics. Estimated runtime, approximately 10 minutes. Let me ask you something. Why does the price of eggs spike after a bad winter storm? Why do some countries grow rich while others stay poor? Why does your government borrow money, and what happens when it borrows too much? These are not abstract questions reserved for professors and politicians. These are the questions that shape your paycheck, your rent, your job security, and your future. Economics is the science of how people make decisions when resources are limited and wants are unlimited. And right now, in a world dealing with inflation, global trade tensions, technological disruption, and widening inequality, understanding economics is not a luxury. It is a survival skill. Welcome to this complete video course based on principles of economics. I am so glad you are here. Over the next 34 chapters, we are going to walk through the entire subject together, from the most basic building blocks all the way to advanced macroeconomic policy and global trade. Whether you are a student, a curious professional, or someone who just wants to understand the news a little better, this playlist is built for you. Let me give you a quick roadmap of everything we are going to cover. We start in Chapter 1, Welcome to Economics, where we ask the foundational question, what is economics and why does it matter? You will learn the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics, and how economists think differently from most people. Chapter 2, Choice in a World of Scarcity, introduces the core problem that drives all of economics. Resources are finite, time is finite. So how do individuals, businesses, and governments make the best possible choices? This chapter introduces opportunity cost and the production possibilities frontier. Chapter 3, Demand and Supply, is where the magic begins. This is the engine of market economics. We will explore how prices are determined, what shifts demand and supply curves, and how markets reach equilibrium. This chapter alone will change how you see every price tag. Chapter 4, Labor and Financial Markets, applies that same demand and supply framework to two of the most important markets in your life, the job market and the market for borrowing and lending money. Chapter 5, Elasticity, teaches you how sensitive buyers and sellers are to price changes. Why does raising the price of cigarettes reduce consumption only a little, while raising the price of a luxury handbag might crush demand entirely? Elasticity explains all of that. Chapter 6, Consumer Choices, digs into the psychology and math behind how individuals decide what to buy. We explore utility, budget constraints, and rational decision-making. Chapter 7, Cost and Industry Structure, shifts to the business side. How do firms calculate their costs? What is the difference between fixed and variable costs? Understanding this chapter is essential for anyone interested in running a business. Chapter 8, Perfect Competition, examines the idealized market structure where many firms compete and no single player controls the price. It serves as our baseline for comparing all other market types. Chapter 9, Monopoly, is where things get interesting. What happens when one firm dominates an entire market? We look at how monopolies form, how they set prices, and why they can be harmful to consumers. Chapter 10, Monopolistic Competition and Oligopoly, covers the messy, realistic middle ground between perfect competition and monopoly. Think coffee shops, smartphone makers, and airline companies. Chapter 11, Monopoly and Antitrust Policy, examines how governments use legal tools to break up or regulate powerful firms. We will talk about real-world antitrust cases you will recognize. Chapter 12, Environmental Protection and Negative Externalities, tackles what happens when markets produce harmful side effects, like pollution, that are not reflected in prices. How can policy fix these market failures? Chapter 13, Positive Externalities and Public Goods, flips the script. Sometimes markets underproduce things that are very good for society, like education or public health. We explore why and what to do about it. Chapter 14, Poverty and Economic Inequality, confronts one of the most pressing issues of our time. How is income distributed? What causes poverty? What do the data actually say about inequality in America and around the world? Chapter 15, Issues in Labor Markets, Unions, Discrimination, and Immigration, takes a deep look at how labor markets can be distorted or made more complex by real-world social and political forces. Chapter 16, Information, Risk, and Insurance, introduces the economics of uncertainty. What happens when one side of a transaction knows more than the other? We cover moral hazard, adverse selection, and why insurance markets exist. Chapter 17, Financial Markets, explains stocks, bonds, and how capital flows through an economy. Understanding this chapter is foundational for personal finance and for understanding business news. Chapter 18, Public Economy, examines the role of government in a market system. When should the government step in, and when should it stay out? Now we transition into macroeconomics, the study of the economy as a whole. Chapter 19, The Macroeconomic Perspective, introduces GDP, economic growth, unemployment, and inflation as the big-picture measurements economists use to assess a country's health. Chapter 20, Economic Growth, asks the most important long-run question in all of economics: why do some countries grow rich and others do not? We explore the roles of technology, capital, and institutions. Chapter 21, Unemployment, breaks down the different types of joblessness and explains why some unemployment is actually normal and even healthy in a dynamic economy. Chapter 22, Inflation, explains why prices rise over time, how it is measured, and why too much or too little inflation causes serious economic problems. Chapter 23, International Trade and Capital Flows, shows how money and goods move between countries and why that matters for everyone, even people who never leave home. Chapter 24, The Aggregate Demand and Aggregate Supply Model, builds the central framework of macroeconomics, a way to understand how the entire economy responds to shocks and policy changes. Chapter 25, The Keynesian Perspective, explores the school of thought that argues government spending can and should stabilize a struggling economy. This is the intellectual foundation behind stimulus packages. Chapter 26, The Neoclassical Perspective, offers the counter-argument that markets self-correct and that long-run growth depends more on productivity than on government intervention. Chapter 27, Money and Banking, explains what money actually is, how banks create it, and why the banking system is central to economic stability. Chapter 28, Monetary Policy and Bank Regulation, focuses on central banks like the Federal Reserve and the tools they use to control inflation and support employment. Chapter 29, Exchange Rates and International Capital Flows, explains why currencies change in value relative to each other and how those changes ripple through the global economy. Chapter 30, Government Budgets and Fiscal Policy, examines taxation and government spending as economic tools. How does a government budget work, and what happens when it does not balance? Chapter 31, The Impacts of Government Borrowing, digs into the consequences of national debt, both short-term and long-term. Chapter 32, Macroeconomic Policy Around the World, takes a global tour of how different countries approach economic management, with real-world case studies. Chapter 33, International Trade, returns to the economics of trade with a deeper focus on comparative advantage, trade agreements, and who wins and who loses from open markets. And finally, Chapter 34, Globalization and Protectionism, brings it all home by examining the ongoing debate about free trade versus protecting domestic industries, a conversation happening in every major economy on the planet right now. By the time you finish this playlist, you will be able to read an economic news story and actually understand what is being said. You will be able to analyze real policy debates with evidence and logic. You will understand why prices behave the way they do, what drives unemployment and inflation, and how governments shape the economy through monetary and fiscal policy. You will think more clearly about trade-offs in your own financial decisions. And you will have a framework for understanding almost every major issue in the news today. That is a serious set of skills, and we are going to build them one chapter at a time. If you want to catch every chapter, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Every video in this playlist is designed to stand alone, but together they form a complete education in economics. We are starting at the very beginning, and I will meet you there. Let us go.